Okay, so now we get on to Poll Everywhere. Just want to see how you're doing today on a scale of 1 to 5. Week 3, still the honeymoon, but we're moving into IRL here. You know, I know midterms might even be coming up in some of your classes. Oh my goodness. But I am glad to see that almost half of the respondents are feeling pretty good or even excellent. And for those of you who are meh or okay, you know, hopefully there's going to be something here to help you reconnect and be reinvigorated about the week ahead. All right, reminding ourselves, where is the Svalbard Global Seed Vault located? I said the Arctic Circle, but let's see. Okay, I don't know how long we need to stay on this page. I think you all got that. We're just double checking that you were paying attention. Excellent. Oh, so if you didn't choose Norway, you might want to just go back and review some of the materials we put out there last week. All right, excellent. When you also had the opportunity to learn about Seed Heroes, right? Those kind of collection of either citizens, scientists, community leaders, politicians. What were you struck by? So you could describe some of their characteristics. You could describe some of their initiatives here, just in a word, if you could capture it. Yes, dedication, passion, commitment, intellectual curiosity, intellectual sharing, conservation, future-proofing. Okay, inspiring. Okay, excellent, wonderful. So if you didn't have a chance to go and check out one or more of the Seed Heroes, I do encourage you, and so do your classmates through this Poll Everywhere. They really are an inspiring bunch working on a variety of issues across the entire world. And then today, you're already populating this. This is as we get ready to hear from our guest speaker. I know you're all excited to dig into coffee with him, so this is wonderful to hear about, to see what you're looking forward to, what you're curious about. And with that, I am going to turn the stage over to Ryan Jongeward, who is from UW Husky Grind, and he is heading up the education program there. And so it is a real opportunity both to learn about coffee, but also learn about the inner workings of coffee on our own campus. And so please join me in giving Ryan a really warm welcome. And Ryan, thank you so much for being here.
Let's check if my mic is working.
Oh yes, there's a little button you have to turn on.
On here? The switch that says on. Okay. How is? Okay. Well, thank you everybody, and thank you for the warm welcome, Iona. I'm very excited to be here. This is my very first time in a classroom teaching. Often it's either in the roastery or in the cafe or various venues, meeting rooms around campus. So today, I'm mostly going to go over kind of an introduction of myself, Husky Grind as an educational program and what we do on campus, and dig into the history of coffee and kind of the story of how we sell coffee and why we drink coffee today. Now, really quick, I'm not seeing the presenter mode with my notes over here. Could I ask for your help? So sorry, y'all. It is. Oops. In the meantime, I'm curious, show of hands, who's this their first time hearing about Husky Grind at all? Okay. Well, I'm glad you're in the room.
Is it extend?
Yeah, if we move the second.
We're going to get there.
It's so weird, it was just working. Yeah, it was showing the notes in the view the first time. seen this thing pop up.
I think if we just do it again, for the first time. Like how you had it the first time, if that worked. That would be.
I could read the notes from my computer and just.
I think that's what we should do. Sorry about the technical issue. All, you're being very patient. We'll be just a moment. It's just if you can
Oh.
do double duty.
Amazing. Perfect. Okay. So, whether or not you've heard about Husky Grind, the reason we're here is primarily as an educational component within housing and food services. You might have noticed most cafes on campus are Starbucks, and then there's 3 Husky Grind cafes. And we're not here to compete with Starbucks, but we exist kind of, independently of each other, but on the same campus, because what we do at Husky Grind is coffee education. What that looks like in the academic cycle is I do a series of workshops from coffee roasting, coffee cupping, a coffee brewing workshop, and a barista basics workshop. That in addition to kind of events like this. And really, Husky Grind started in 2014, and again, the goal is to just teach people about coffee. We have a coffee roaster on campus, which was, when I saw this job posted on Google in the middle of COVID, I was blown away to learn that UW has a coffee roastery. And some of you in this room learned that just today. So part of my job over the last 4 years and change has been getting the word out and growing that education program. And so the program goals for Husky Grind are critical consumerism. So in short, the more you know about a product or what you're purchasing or about the market, the more informed you are when you take whatever you decide off the shelf, right? Professional development, so building up skill sets that translate into the real world. Learning coffee roasting was very non-linear for me because there's not really a degree you go get. So very cool opportunity to just capture all of your attention on campus, and if you're interested, I can teach you how to roast coffee. Pretty unique. Collaborative learning, so again, like those workshops that I do throughout the academic quarter. Social and educational growth. I firmly believe that each of us has something to learn from one another, and I see that happen a lot in the education events themselves, where often, 10 or so people might be a little shy, they might not know each other, but by the end, whether it's the caffeine or whatnot, usually there's a lot of engagement and chatter and friends made by the end of it, and campus partnerships exactly like this one. So, I honestly wish I could take this seminar because I'm very interested in learning the rest of the content of the other seminars for the rest of the quarter, but you will all have to give me an update as to what you've learned. So to go over a brief history of coffee, however true it is, we'll never know, but the myth goes a little something like this, that in the 9th century, there was a goat herd named Caldi out tending his flocks, and he noticed out over there by a particular bush, these goats were eating these berries and like jumping around and going crazy, and so he went over to investigate, noticed that it was these berries they were eating, and decided to eat one himself, and felt maybe the first person to feel caffeine for the first time. So he was confused, a little scared, and he sought out the advice of a nearby Sufi monk who is said to have rejected the coffee as evil and threw it into the fire. Then allegedly from there, shortly after, a nice smell arose, and then they brewed it, I guess, and ground it up and turned it into the first ever, probably not worst ever, cup of coffee. So that's the fun mythical version. But from there, it was quickly adopted in the Islamic world, following the path of the spice and slave trade, primarily through the Dutch East India Company. By the 15th century, it was grown in the Yemeni district of Arabia. By the 16th century, it was known in Persia, Egypt, Syria, and Turkey. Somewhere between 1615 and 1700, coffee found its way to the Pope, who approved of it after trying it. In the 17th century, seedlings were successfully planted in what is now Java, Indonesia. And then between 1727 and 1800, Brazil decided it wanted its own coffee market. And in what I can't believe hasn't been made into a movie, the story goes that Lieutenant Colonel Francisco de Melo Paleta was dispatched to French Guiana, and there he seduced the governor's wife, who gifted him a bouquet upon his departure, and hidden in that bouquet were seedlings. So that's literally why Brazil has coffee. In the 18th century, Latin American countries began to claim independence, and colonialism moved east through Africa to Congo and Madagascar, as well as Southeast Asia, Britain, and France, consolidating their African claims and kind of codifying like payment structures and boundary lines that are contested to this day. This could all be considered the lead up to and like first wave of coffee consumption globally, but it's a very wild oversimplification of all the rest of the not so fun history alongside that. So jumping to the 1900s, between 1934 and 1963, a research company called Scott Labs did a whole bunch of research primarily in Kenya, and they were looking into crossing heirloom coffee varieties with themselves to try to make like a hardier version of the plant. We'll get in a little bit more of the particulars of that later on. But that research created a foundation for future coffee research that's still referenced to this day. For instance, like the Kenya that we have is more than likely an SL28, which is called an SL28 because Scott Labs is the SL, and it was the 28th heirloom coffee that they discovered, and it happens to be phenomenal. So jumping back to the 1900s, post the Scott Labs research, in 1962, the International Coffee Agreement was put in place between coffee-producing countries and importing companies to prevent supply and demand swings in the global marketplace and to stabilize prices. Starbucks opened its doors in 1971 and kind of pioneered this concept of like a third place, this place that is not home and is not work, but a place you go to in between. You can kind of think of like the TV show Friends, the cafe they're hanging out at, that like pretty much embodies second wave coffee. Which brings us to, pardon me. Sorry, I'm getting lost in my notes here. There we go. So yes, what is sometimes referred to as third wave coffee is synonymous with specialty coffee. Specialty coffee is defined by both its degree of traceability as well as it having scored 80 points or higher on a scale of 0 to 100. That is kind of dictated by Q graders, as they're known, or QC graders, and they are professional coffee tasters who are at origin. Typically, they are in peak harvest season. They might be tasting 100 to 300 samples of coffee in the course of a day or two. And so the method used is a coffee cupping, which I have every Wednesday in Chef's Table and Local Point if you're interested in partaking. And so that is the literal definition of like the difference, like what is specialty coffee, what's not specialty coffee. It's that traceability and that it scored really high on that scale of 0 to 100. So what does the coffee life cycle look like? I like to start by asking, do we even know what coffee is? What is coffee? Some of you, does anybody know? Okay, well that's why I'm here. So a coffee bean is actually the seed of a coffee cherry. So this is a cross section if you're to cut a coffee cherry in half. Each coffee cherry, typically, unless there's something wrong, has 2 seeds inside. There are two primary species of coffee in the marketplace. Those are Robusta and Arabica. Main difference being all specialty coffee is going to be Arabica, but not all Arabica coffee is specialty grade. Conversely, Robusta is kind of the cousin of Arabica coffee that is not as lauded for tasting good, but it grows everywhere compared to how sensitive the Arabica plant is. Robusta also is not known for tasting good, so coffee producing countries whose main outsourcing crop is going to be like Robusta, likely that's going to end up as like kind of filler in your Folgers coffee or your mass-produced coffee because it's cheap and you can, especially if it's harvested by robots and machines and stuff. There's not a lot of care that goes into it, but it translates into probably a lot of caffeine in your energy drinks. We all love our Celsius on campus. And with that, there is a spectrum of processing methods involved in coffee once you pick it from the tree. But for the sake of keeping it simple, there's pretty much washed, which means they remove this coffee cherry fruit from the beans completely before it dries. A natural is on the opposite end of the spectrum, where they leave the coffee beans inside that cherry for the drying phase. And then hybrid or honey process is everything in between. And there's even stuff in addition to that that's pretty exciting. But we'll try to stay on track with coffee's life cycle. So it starts with the producer, right? With the farm or the washing station. From the farm, it gets processed sometimes at the location of the farm. Sometimes it's taken from like a family farm to a central processing unit, as they're known, like a community station that might be miles away. From there, it's sorted, graded. If there's running water, that is one way to remove a lot of defects, is they kind of like put the beans in a floating channel. Any beans that float are the ones that are bad. This is obviously why countries or regions where it's hard to find water, you'll find more natural produced coffees because they don't have to use all the water involved in removing that coffee cherry. From there, a coffee importer or any various coffee buyer shows up to there, dictates a price. They sell it to, they make that contract. I keep forgetting I have a microphone, so sorry. Us as Husky Grind, and kind of where we step in, the importer is kind of that middle person that handles all of the logistics between origin and me picking it up. If anything, arguably, I have the very easy part of the job. It's worth mentioning 70% of the labor involved in coffee production happens before it even leaves its country of origin. And so Husky Grind kind of jumps in around 5.5 on this little diagram. I go down to Auburn, where Atlas has a coffee it's not owned by Atlas, actually. It's called the Green Room, and they house coffee for pretty much all of the Pacific Northwest. It's a massive, massive, massive warehouse. Very impressive to see if you ever have the opportunity. It's also worth recognizing just how much work goes into coffee production or agriculture work globally. 70% is done by women, and coffee is no exception for that. Just a reminder for all of us. And so going back to the importer, and so Atlas, again, is the name of the company we partner with as Husky Grind. They store the coffee. They handle anything that could be going wrong with the coffee itself, physically in transport. I've worked at a roastery before where even it wasn't this importer, it was another not quite so big importer, but we ran into an issue there where we had been sent a sample of a coffee, right? We tasted it, we loved it, it was amazing. And then what they sent us was not that coffee. It was like a completely different coffee, and it was fine, but somewhere along the line, somebody did some kind of swap-a-roo. So interesting to know, and keep in mind, like there's still cartels, stealing coffee. I haven't heard of, it makes me curious as to like who's buying this specialty coffee. But that is why we partner with a coffee importer, is because if, me as a roaster or UW as an individual, you might have heard the term direct trade, where there's a direct relationship with the farmer. That can be great, but you also add a myriad of risks, and so we as UW want to mitigate that and love partnering with Atlas, and they offer some very cool opportunities by partnering with them. Some of the benefits of partnering with a coffee importer of their caliber is like a massive degree of buying power and traceability on their side. So for any coffee that Husky Grind has, I can tell you, and it's on their website too, you can look at the farm it came from, the elevation it was grown at, the variety or varieties that comprise that particular lot of coffee. And the idea being, if I'm buying coffee from producers with the intention to support and improve coffee and quality of life at origin, I'm getting better coffee from them year after year. It's tasting better for me, but mostly to you, the customer. And so you have this kind of like theoretically perfect cycle of like everybody wins. So that is what I see as the goal and the pursuit in specialty coffee. So I did want to talk about a few of the offerings we have at Husky Grind. That said, we are out of the Mexico. I do have the Rwanda, and I think I'm on the last bag of Guatemala, so get it while you can. But there are some worthwhile stories to tell for these producers. It's something to keep in mind if you're a note taker. For context against all this, of 12.5 million coffee farms, more than 12.4 million are smallholders, meaning that their farm is fewer than 30 hectares or just under 75 acres. Smallholders produce close to 80% of coffee worldwide, and more than 50% live in poverty. So, it is therefore cool when I can look at what Atlas is offering and find a coffee with a story like this. So Atlas has had a close relationship with, I always butcher the name if I try to say it out, so I'm just going to call it a Codihue. But it's a farmers co-op in Guatemala. It was originally founded in 1996 with support from the EU and the Guatemalan government, and it slowly built its membership membership and its reputation for quality coffee. Currently, Codihue has 1,034 members, 722 of which are women who have between 0.04 and 1 hectare of land. 1 hectare of land is 2.47 acres. And so when that program ended, they still wanted to work in coffee. And so that cooperative has kept growing and has began selling women-produced coffee under the name Manos de Mujer. That wasn't available, so I couldn't purchase that, but this is from that same cooperative. But now there are 21 separate women's groups, each with between 15 and 100 members who are separated by region throughout Huehuetenango, which is a region in Guatemala. And Codihue is very invested in the economic sustainability of women in coffee and in the community. They also offer trainings and workshops every year to promote women in coffee. And in the last few years, they've also formed a youth in coffee group aimed at keeping young people in the coffee world and away from migrating out of it, because that is a big problem in a lot of these smaller farms, is a lot of people don't want to farm coffee. They want to go, work in tech, work in something else. There's a less and less incentive to be a coffee farmer. So jumping to the Rwanda Sholi Cooperative. Sholi began after the genocide in 1994, and they have a strong history of women's leadership. The chairwoman, Martha Muka Karangwa, has been part of Sholi since its inception. and shared with Atlas during their 2023 visit that for women-produced premiums, the union gives 2/3 of the funds directly to female members to use as they see fit, and the other third kind of gets pooled to fund a project as decided by the women. So that year, they decided to use those funds to learn both how to sew and create crafts, to provide materials and create and sell the crafts. So essentially gave them enough to start a little side hustle in addition to all the coffee things. Jumping to our Mexico, this was a really fantastic coffee that came to us through the NKG Bloom initiative, which is started by the Newman Cafe Group. This gets a little boring in lots of names here, but essentially Newman Cafe Group is the bigger group that has the majority stakehold in Atlas Coffee. But because of their funding, part of what they do is providing smallholder farmers with the opportunities and resources they need to run their farm at full potential and enter a path out of poverty. Participating farmers and smallholders and farmer organizations are largely comprised of producers with fewer than 30 hectares. So again, some pretty small farms. And the NKG Bloom, core tenets, they have 3 core tenets, which are enabling farmers to realize their full potential and maximizing their income, supporting inclusive sustainability where even earnest improvements are encouraged, and striving for transparency and traceability through the use of mobile software to support both producers and roasters who produce their coffee. Financing is often the core bottleneck faced by farmers. And so through a multi-year effort, NKG created a unique risk-sharing credit solution. Essentially 4 big old lenders came together, and it resulted in a fund of $25 million that these farmers can borrow from that's specifically set aside for this reason and helps alleviate, it might be as simple as if I am in rural Latin America at a farm and I have to move X bags of coffee 10 miles, it helps a lot to have a vehicle. So it might be as simple as like renting a truck, getting running water installed at a given farm or processing place. And circling back to the program goals of critical consumerism. Critical consumerism is the piece where each of us has like the least barrier of entry to the participation in a sustainable model of ethical coffee consumption. Every dollar you spend has a very direct correlation with the way the world will continue to be molded. And that idea can be really overwhelming or extremely liberating, provided you allow yourself and others some grace. In short, like, we have a degree in where our money goes and what we get out of our miniature investments in a purchase. If we are buying and supporting local small business, theoretically, those dollars are going to stay in that community. So with that, combined, Starbucks and JAB Holding Company own 78% of U.S. coffee shops. Peet's Coffee alone owns 11% of the global coffee market. And that division of global holdings has a massive influence on the C price, or the commodity price of coffee. C price has been, and the price of coffee is like a whole other thing I could go on and frankly need to do more research on. But for coffee producers, earnings have been stagnant since like the 80s. And the price of coffee has been not matching the cost of production for decades. And it's very much coming to a head. So it's a very interesting time, especially, you hear about tariffs and all this stuff. Being on LinkedIn and being in the coffee industry, if you want a window into any of that going on, just find any green coffee importer, producer, and follow them, and they'll have lots of news to share that I don't have time for here. But it's very compelling and very interesting. So, it's understandable to raise an eyebrow when a 12-ounce cup of black coffee, no matter how special it might be, at your local coffee shop down the road, it's understandable to not want to spend $8 on that cup of coffee. But it's my job and the job of any respectable coffee roaster of specialty coffee to do both justice to the coffee itself, but as well as all the hard work that goes into that beautiful coffee that we receive. Specialty coffee is a luxury, and not all of us have the room in our budget to allow for such extravagances. But I'm privileged, and we're privileged to have this opportunity on campus to purchase, produce, and consume specialty coffee and use it as a learning opportunity in every direction. And I have to note, I have not found specialty coffee on campus, specialty coffee anywhere in the world for $1 per ounce, which is what we're currently charging at Husky Grind. Now, that may have to change inevitably, but for now, those prices are locked in, so very affordable specialty coffee. And again, I do coffee cuppings every Wednesday in Chef's Table, and as the year goes on, I'm going to be adding more and more workshops. And I'm also interested to learn what you all want to learn about coffee. So with that, I will open it up to questions.
Okay, thank you. Brian, thank you so much. And I just want to say there was an invitation for your questions, which I know Brian would love, but also your input, right? So like what else you would like to see our in-house coffee educator provide for in terms of opportunities. So the floor is open. And I think Emma is ready to run to you wherever you are with a microphone. You don't need to run, Emma, but.
Yes.
We'll just have you speak into
Sure.
the mic so it captures for the recording. Thank you. And we'll just get off to the side.
Where do we buy your coffee?
Great question. Any one of the Husky Grind cafes. So there's one inside each district market and then one over in Mercer Court if you happen to be on West Campus. Other questions, thoughts?
Could you share a bit about the different coffee varieties? I know you talked about Arabica and Robusta. Are there other ones besides that? How
Yes.
did those two kind of become so prominent? And are there other kind of up-and-coming varieties that
Great question.
we can learn
yes.
about?
So there's, again, the great thing about Robusta is it grows everywhere. So since the 60s or before, we've been trying to cross that perfect varietal where we have the wonderful flavors happening in an Arabica plant, but without the meh or badness of Robusta. The most successful cross at the moment is a variety called Roiru, R-U-I-R-U. And there are, Atlas, for the first time I'm seeing some Roiru as either, I don't think any of their offerings are like a 100% Roiru, but Roiru is one of two or more components in some of the lots I've seen. Did that answer your question? Cool.
Hi. If we're trying to be more critical consumers, like in the grocery store, for example, of coffee, what sort of labels or language on the packages would you recommend we look for?
That's a great question. I think, again, the defining characteristics being traceability and that it scored 80 points or higher on that, that cupping score. Whatever package, and it's tricky too, because nowadays, often you'll see a bag of coffee and it'll have the region it comes from, like the country, the region within the country, the micro lot. The more atomized rather the information on the bag, the more likely it's probably specialty coffee. I imagine most local coffee roasters around Seattle probably source from Atlas, if not a similar coffee importer. I would be surprised if there were, I don't think there's anybody locally doing non-specialty coffee. But yeah, and I'm thinking just to what's in the grocery stores. And it's tricky because that can of Folgers that says 100% Arabica on the shelf legally only has to be 70% Arabica, which is part of where Robusta comes in. And so labels can be very misleading too. And so that's, I might even encourage you co-ops, in my experience, tend to have a little bit better coffee selection and more local coffee selection. And aside from that, just finding a local roastery or cafe that you like and just want to support. Other questions?
Could you just repeat the pros and cons / differences between Arabica and Robusta?
Yeah, so Arabica is really, it's susceptible to disease, to climate change, to coffee rust. It's a small plant. It's fragile. It is finicky. Robusta is big and ugly and kind of, well, ugly comparatively. Maybe I still think they look pretty. But Robusta just kind of grows everywhere and really has very little value flavor-wise. Lots of intense and bad stuff going on. But Robusta does have a higher caffeine content. So historically, a traditional Italian espresso blend is going to be 1/3 Robusta, and then 1/3 Ethiopia and 1/3 Latin America, to kind of balance out that intensity and not pleasantness of the Robusta. Did that answer your question about the cool? Other questions? I'm loving the hands up.
How do we sign up for one of your workshops?
Wonderful question. I should have brought, so if you go to a Husky Grind cafe, you should see a acrylic sign holder, or sometimes it's on the digital signboards, the signage that says join the brew crew. That is a QR code link that if you fill out that thing, you'll get invites every, I think it's 2 weeks for all the incoming Husky Grind events. Thank you.
And also one of your readings was the Husky Coffee Education page, and I think there's some information about workshops.
There should be links there,
Yes.
as well.
I was wondering what you would say are the major forces that are going to impact the future of the coffee supply chain and what we're getting. I know you mentioned sustainability. Is there going to be fair trade? Are we just trying to produce as much as we possibly can? Curious if you have any thoughts on that.
So can you ask that one more time? Sorry, I want to make sure I understand.
Really big level factors in the market that are going to kind of shape where coffee is going. I know for Starbucks, for example, they've tried to list a lot of green initiatives that are going forwards. If you have any idea on what the really big factors in the market are going forwards.
I mean, the biggest thing is the brokenness of the price of commodity coffee. I don't know, and I'm very interested to see what happens with that. It's just the coffee market is very, very, very volatile. And it's something I need to know more, research more so I know more about it. But, for the first time ever, the commodity price of coffee broke $4 for the first time sometime, I want to say around spring or over the summer. And just as an indicator that there's a disparity between supply and demand, as well as, ultimately, what's the incentive to go farm coffee? If you're not making money, or if I can plant soybeans and know that they're going to grow and not be all this hassle, that's what a lot of farmers are doing. So that's where, at least part of the solution, in my view, is me as a coffee consumer, I'm okay with sometimes, as able, throwing $25 at a 10-ounce bag of coffee because it's an interesting coffee. But I don't know if that's enough to sustain the specialty industry. It's because it's also, we're in a bit of we know how much groceries cost right now. So until it lets up for us, whatever that requires. I don't know exactly what it'll be for the future of coffee. I don't think coffee is going to completely disappear. I think, if anything, we might end up with slightly lower quality coffee than we're used to if there's this, mass exodus from specialty coffee producing farms. But yeah, we will see. We're kind of in it.
Suppose if you like just go to like a local roaster and want to like buy beans or something, what is like a drink that you would order to like judge how good the beans are, or what do you look for when buying like beans from local roasters?
Yeah, typically if I'm like kind of checking out, scoping out a new roastery for the first time, I'll want a drip coffee, an espresso, and a cold brew. Kind of tastes like their versions of black coffee. And that's pretty much it. I mean, I like lattes too occasionally, but black coffee is like my favorite coffee drink. So that's the primary thing that I'm after, whether it's Husky Grind coffee or anybody else's coffee.
I think there's time for one last question. Okay, other side of the room. That's good. You got to get over there.
This is not necessarily a question, just a comment. You mentioned that Robusta is mainly a filler, but in Seattle, like there are a lot of Vietnamese coffee shops that actually do sell Robusta coffee for drinking, just like pure Robusta
Yes.
coffee for drinking. So
That actually is one place I might recommend. Is there is a cafe called Hello spelled
Hello
E-M.
M.
Yeah. And there is, if you are a coffee drinker, I think it's a great opportunity to taste a Robusta. And thank you for mentioning them, because they're worth shouting out. I really enjoyed the coffees I had there. The flavor is a little, it's different than I'm used to, but I appreciate any time I'm tasting coffee, not my own, because it's like palate calibration no matter what. But yes, if you have any others you would recommend, please let me know after this is over.
One more huge round of applause. Thank you so much, Ryan. And thank you all so much for those excellent questions. You'll have an opportunity to submit a summary. If you haven't yet, this is a great time to get started on that. And also include a question, and we'll take subsets of those questions and make sure that we pass them on to Ryan so he can see comments and questions. Thank you so much for all of your engagement. I hope you have a great afternoon, and I look forward to seeing you next week for our next seed case study. It'll be on climate changed wheat. More to come next week. Have a great rest of the week.